Good Friday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. Some news concerning some of the Browns assistant coaches today, and they involved the Jets offensive coordinator position. So Mary Kay Cabot confirming in a report that Bill Callahan turned down a request to interview for the Jets offensive coordinator job and is actually going to receive an extension to remain with the Browns. That great news for Kevin Stefanski and that offensive line. Also, Chad O'Shea, wide receivers coach, did interview for the Jets offensive coordinator's job. Let's welcome in Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, Browns beat reporter. Ashley, good news with Bill Callahan. That's a guy that you definitely want around when you're going to remake the offense with Deshaun Watson at quarterback.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Bill Callahan is widely regarded as one of the best coaches in the NFL. The Browns are so lucky to have him on their staff, and all the players obviously really respect him. And of course, he's kind of been the architect of this wide zone scheme that they run in a lot of ways. He's really helped implement that. He has two of the best pulling guards in the NFL, in Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller, to kind of make that happen. And it is, those guys alluded to over the last 6 weeks of the season. It's an adjustment to play with a quarterback like Deshaun. Number one, he holds on to the ball a lot. Number two, he's a lot more mobile. He can come out of the pocket. He does all those things, and I think a lot of times, he's more prone to sacks because of that. But I do really think the Browns are going to benefit a lot from having Bill Callahan stay on the staff, help them get through this big adjustment, because it is a big adjustment.
Yeah, without question. The offense will be remade. The defense will likely be remade as well. News this week, Jim Schwartz hired as the defensive coordinator. How do you, and I know you've dealt with this on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, and you've also written about it. How do you think he impacts Myles Garrett, and how do you think he fits, and this defense will be fit around him?
I think the biggest impact for Myles is typically Jim Schwartz has put his stars up front in a position to rush the passer. That's kind of the whole idea of this wide nine scheme that he has. Now, he hasn't been a defensive coordinator in about 3 seasons, so we don't know for sure, obviously, that he's going to run that wide nine, but we can kind of infer that. And if he does, it's going to allow Myles Garrett to get more one-on-one matchups, to start out a little bit further than he has normally throughout his career. And that in turn is going to let him build up more speed, in theory, create more one-on-one matchups, and be able to get to quarterbacks more quickly. So I think in a perfect world, if Jim Schwartz brings that same scheme to Cleveland, Myles Garrett should be getting more sacks. And, he said he's going to hold him to a high standard, and there's already a high standard set for Myles Garrett with 16 sacks in each of the last 2 seasons. But I would expect that number to climb if this scheme looks like what we think it's going to look like. Do you think
the fit with Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator into this Browns defensive structure, or the talent they have at least, do you think it's a good fit?
Well, I think it's interesting. I do think it's a good fit. I do think he was the safe but smart hire. I know my colleague Terry Pluto wrote a column about that, because Jim Schwartz has had so much success with turning around defenses throughout his career, especially with run defense. But I do think what's so interesting about the system, if you're creating more one-on-one matchups for your edge rushers, it puts a lot more pressure on your defensive tackles and your interior defensive linemen, because they're going to have to go against opposing offensive tackles a lot more. So I'm really curious to kind of see. I think the Browns need some help on their D-line. I think they might need 1 or 2 more edge rushers. I think they're going to need to go and at least get one big, potentially game-changing veteran defensive tackle, because those guys have more responsibility in this system.
Yeah, those would be all things to keep an eye on as free agency unfolds. Could be trades and the like as well. Kevin Stefanski was involved doing the radio rounds today. He was on ESPN Cleveland's The Really Big Show, and was asked about how he prefers to keep team issues behind closed doors.
We have very intelligent fans in Northeast Ohio, Browns fans. So, I'm always trying to be fair to our players. I'll be honest, I don't like to put internal issues out there in the public. That's just not, I don't believe in that. I don't think that's fair to our players. There are things that happen behind closed doors that are always going to stay behind closed doors with me. I just think that's the right way to treat people. I respect our fans. I respect our fans, their passion for this in instances like that, or whatever it is. Like, I understand that they want to hear every detail, but I'm trying to be fair also to the players. And the last thing I would say is it's not about me. I never, ever, ever will make this about me. And the easiest thing I can do is just be myself, and that's what I'll do.
And Ashley, he confirmed what we thought. He's just not going to talk about things publicly.
Yeah, and I think like hitting the nail on the head was that last little bit of what he said, that he doesn't want to make things about him. I've heard him say that before. I really think it's kind of his main philosophy with dealing with the media and dealing with those press conferences. And, I always think about Joel Bitonio at one point, I think it was last year, said, there are times where we would come in from the locker room in past regimes with past coaches and pull out their phones and see a headline from the head coach and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this guy said that. And I think Kevin Stefanski is the exact antithesis of that. Like, he never wants to be the guy that is going to be responsible for a headline that's going to distract the players or take away from something they're doing. So, yeah, not really surprised he's not going to get into the intricacies of what happened with Jadeveon Clowney, especially, and other drama that's occurred in this building over the last 2 years. But I do think that last little bit of what he said kind of sums up his philosophy as a head coach and dealing with the public.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So the question is, 7-10 team, what areas are most critical to be upgraded for the Browns to get those additional 3-4 wins that make them a playoff team?
Yeah, I'm going to stay harping on the fact I feel like they need another veteran wide receiver in this room. For as much as I love Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I always say I appreciate, I think, what he does more than a lot of people do, because I've gotten to see him up close since going back to when he was in college. But this room has always kind of felt like a veteran receiver short. I know we've talked about it before. I know Mary Kay Cabot has brought it up. It's almost like they need a Tyreek Hill copycat almost. Like, that's what they're missing, like a speedy guy who can just get open, who can beat people. So that's on the offensive side for me. On the defensive side, I really think it's defensive tackle. You've got to figure out a way to upgrade that spot. It's just the weak link in the defense. I think there are some other questions, at safety. Like, we know John Johnson has a huge cap hit. They could potentially save money if he's gone after June 1st. Grant Delpit, I think, is still a question mark. But for me, and your linebackers dealt with a lot of injuries. I don't know if you want to bring somebody else in there, like a bruiser type, bigger sort of player, because all these guys are under 240. I just looked that up yesterday when Jim Schwartz was talking about the size of his linebackers. So maybe you go and get a bigger guy, but I really think defensive tackle is like the main issue they need to be working on.
Yeah, I would agree about the defensive tackle, and that kind of goes into my next question to you. You did write a takeaway article about Jim Schwartz talking about the linebackers. He basically said, coach big linebackers, coach little linebackers, they need to be instinctual. Take us through your article and just kind of the takeaways from that.
Yeah, the biggest thing with the linebackers was, and we've kind of wondered this all year, like, are these guys the Browns have really made key players on their defense too small? Again, I think, like, I was joking with Dan Labby, my colleague, and I'm like, guess which one of these guys is the biggest guy they have? And it's Sione Takitaki, which, like, isn't surprising when you look at them side to side, but he's only 238, and he tore his ACL, and right now he told us he's slated to come back in October, about 10 months out from his surgery date, which was in mid-December on that ACL. But I just think it was interesting to kind of hear him say, like, a guy doesn't have to be 250. And he kind of like cracked this joke, like, well, we don't want them over 250, certainly, but the Browns don't have any of those big guys. And I just wonder, given his defensive scheme, so much is placed on the guys up front. He even said, you can't win in coverage in this league. The receivers are too good. The way the calls are anymore, you have to win up front is kind of his philosophy. So it just kind of was interesting to hear it. He wasn't sounding the alarm bells that the size of these guys was really big, but he made it clear, like, they have to be imposing. And I don't know I'm curious to see which of those guys will stand out in that regard. I think Taki is one. I think JOK is certainly explosive. And I'm just really curious to kind of see how they're going to use all these guys once they are healthy and back.
Yeah, it will be very interesting, particularly the linebackers. Again, Kevin Stefanski from ESPN Cleveland's The Really Big Show talked about the role analytics plays in the Browns' decision-making process with him, as well as Paul DePodesta, Chief Strategy Officer.
You feel empowered to make these decisions, right?
Yeah, I mean, I am making them. So yeah,
Right.
I do feel that. And when they work, you're a genius. When they don't work, you're a moron.
Right.
So that's football. That's coaching 101. And I own that. That's accountability, because the wins loss, that record goes next to my name. You own it. As it relates to Paul, Paul's a big part of what we do, about what I do. He's great in terms of everyday conversations, where we're going in a personnel thing that we're doing, where we're going in game plan, just talking about football, talking about what works, kind of what I was talking about earlier with game planning, looking at things from a different lens of what hurts this team, what can we do. So Paul is another help for me.
And again, the bottom line with what Kevin Stefanski was saying is analytics is a tool that he helps make decisions based on what he sees football-wise. It isn't strictly a numbers decision.
Yeah, I think like sometimes among the fans or on Twitter, there's this perception that like Paul DePodesta is radioing down to Kevin Stefanski every play to figure out what to call. Like, that's not really how this works. I think in many ways he's become sort of this boogeyman for fans whenever anything goes wrong. But again, like, to take it back to the Jim Schwartz presser, like, he brought up a great point that, like, you don't want to be, it's analysis by paralysis. You don't want that to happen. And I do wonder, like, hey, is that maybe happening sometimes? Like, we're thinking about things too much. But, I think the Browns are never fully going to divulge what exactly this relationship is like. It wouldn't be quite like them. But I do think like analytics aren't controlling every single thing they do. That's kind of like a common misconception. Like, I think they are making football decisions sometimes, and it's not that version, I think, that's been hyped up on Twitter or that's been going around on Twitter the last few weeks.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Again, they do use analytics to as the foundation or the reasons they make certain decisions, but it isn't. It's a part of the equation. Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear more from Kevin Stefanski, plus head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Kevin Stefanski again on the morning or the Really Big Show on ESPN Cleveland this morning talked about fourth down decision making, when to go for it, when to kick field goals.
We're trying to be smart and part of being smart is there's going to be some risk involved. You want to be aggressive. I think the players certainly, you want to play an aggressive style. You don't want to be ultra conservative, ultra safe. So I believe in that. I believe in playing aggressive. Anytime it doesn't work, obviously I'm also on there being like, okay, we had an option to kick the field goal, punt. But in the long run, I feel like I'm trying to just put our team in position to succeed. I know all of us are outcome based. So when it doesn't work, that's where your mind initially goes. Sometimes it does work, and that gets forgotten pretty quickly too. So it's always going to be about making smart decisions for a football team. if we get it, we're talking about 7 points. If we don't get it, we're backing them up. That's kind of what I believe in. I believe in putting our defense in a situation where you can back them up. Now, we take everything into account. Who are we playing? How's our matchup of our defense versus their offense? Who's their quarterback? Do we think this is going to be a high-scoring game, a low-scoring game? Do we think we have to score a lot of points on offense? So many factors go into that.
And Ashley, the thing that he didn't say that would also go into it is who your quarterback is. And I think with Deshaun Watson and what is expected to be a more explosive offense, you may see a slight shift in that decision making.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think like that it could potentially, it's going to probably make them go for it more because you're going to be looking for those kind of vertical plays. And I think maybe they're going to be in those situations less once this offense is fully up and running, because Deshaun Watson's going to get you out of a lot of stuff if things are really clicking. But I do think, especially given how mobile he is, and, we always joked about the Jacoby Brissett sneak, like Deshaun Watson has his own threats in those various fourth down situations. So, I think he's obviously very formidable for opposing defenses to try to figure out what this guy is going to do. And a split second could cost you a conversion.
All right, so let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I just want to make a comment on trade scenarios. Now, I know that everybody says that you can't have enough corners, which is accurate, but do you think that Andrew Berry stockpile corners, or basically DBs, so he can possibly make a trade with one or two of them? The Browns have limited resources to pull off a trade by just using draft capital. Would you consider trading Ward for a position of need? I know we also have JJ3 as an option, but in my opinion, Ward can fetch something of significance in return. What say you? Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Greedy Williams probably won't be back, so then you're now looking at 3 in Newsome, Emerson, and Ward, AJ Green. Here's the thing. You're going to want cover corners because Jim Schwartz is going to put them at the line and say, go make people's lives miserable at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I think to answer that voicemail, I don't think there's any way they would trade Denzel Ward. They just gave him a huge extension that at the time made him the top paid corner in the league. I know he got edged out there after his extension came through, but yeah, I mean, I think the secondary, he's the guy in the secondary. And JJ, like I said earlier, I think they would be more likely to maybe, cut their losses with him so that they get some cap relief after June 1st. But, we haven't really heard any major rumblings of that. It's just kind of a theory we've been throwing around amongst ourselves. But I think the reason Andrew Berry stockpiles these guys is not for trade potential, but because how valuable they are. This team was kind of built to be a coverage defense, which again, I think is why it's so interesting that you bring in Jim Schwartz, who essentially says, hey, you can't win on defense with your coverage guys. You have to have strong guys up front too. But this defense is kind of built to compete with the high-flying pass offenses, so to speak. And you need a lot of guys because look what happened this year when you have Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome dealing with these injuries and nagging injuries and missing training camp. And Greg Newsome gets a fluke concussion and Denzel gets a fluke concussion. Things can happen. And thank God they had Martin Emerson. I think last draft we were all like, oh, they're probably not going to go with the DB. They have so many. And then he was their first pick, but it ended up working out.
Yeah, without question. Let's take a look at some of the NFL's free agent rushers. This is going to be based on their Pro Football Focus ranking. And again, these guys may not make it. They may end up getting franchised or the like. But Marcus Davenport of the Saints, PFF overall ranking 22. Jadeveon Clowney of the Browns, overall ranking 26. I think we can probably cross him off the list. I don't think they're signing him. Melvin Ingram, overall PFF ranking of 37 with the Dolphins. That's an interesting name that we heard bantied about a little bit last year. Justin Houston of the Ravens, 38th ranked. Brandon Graham of the Eagles. That would be a name to keep an ear out for if he is able to get to free agency, ranked 39th. And then Charles Omenihu of the 49ers, overall rank of 41. Do you see any of those as being possible options for the Browns? It's probably going to depend on dollar figure, but
Yeah, I think it depends on dollar figure. I mean, Omenahu's kind of interesting to me. A lot of those guys are veteran guys who are maybe rotational pass players at this point. And I really think the Browns need a true second edge rusher. I don't think Alex Wright is there yet. And I talked to Alex the last week of the season, and we kind of talked about how for him pass rushing was kind of like a culture shock coming from UAB in college, so not a big time college program, and coming to the NFL. So I do think a guy like Omenahu who has this experience might be a good guy to try to go after and try to get to come in here. But again, I think it kind of underscores how unfortunate this whole thing with Jadeveon Clowney is, because like you said, he's the second best guy available, and we can probably cross that off the list even with a change in coordinator, because Jim Schwartz and kind of how he came up, he seems, a very old school guy who's kind of embraced, new school things on the field, including analytics. But I don't think what Jadeveon Clowney pulled the last week of the season would fly in a Jim Schwartz defense either. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's not the guy, but I do think you need somebody who can play a decent number of snaps opposite Myles Garrett.
Yeah, and they have to be productive. You have to find a guy that can give you the production that you got from Clowney 2 years ago to make this defense work. All right, before I let you go, I know you wrote an article about the offensive line. What did you think about Ethan Posick? That's a guy that will be a free agent coming up. He's not under contract.
Yeah, he's really a guy who I can't stop singing the praises of. I think we kind of didn't know what to make of him. At first, he seemed like an insurance policy that they signed, and he essentially was. They were ready to go with Nick Harris, a guy they drafted, a guy who they liked what they saw from him over the first 2 years of his career. And then he has the season-ending injury. But I think Ethan Posick, what's so unique about him is he has the size at 6'6", but he can pull alongside guys like Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller, which is crazy when you watch him move. I think his absence after he had that knee injury against Buffalo, his absence over those next couple of games, really hurt them as a line. I know Nick Harris has been working really hard to get back, and maybe they're going to automatically say he's the guy still, but Posick was one of the best centers in the league this year. Looking at his PFF numbers, he's in the top 15 in just about everything. I think he had the number 3 offensive grade among all centers in the NFL this year, behind a guy like Jason Kelce, which is crazy. So I think he may have forced their hand in a lot of ways. I think you kind of have to bring him back, and these guys played really well alongside him. I think he has that atypical size for the position, but the fact that he can move and pull and block the way he does is really, I think, a good fit for a Bill Callahan style of play on the line.
He definitely made a difference without question. When he was not in, you saw a drop in that offensive line. Ashley Bastock, as always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Ashley.
Thanks.
Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter, plain dealer, cleveland.com. Always really good stuff. Make sure you check her out. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Lance Reisland with a film breakdown of what to expect from a Jim Schwartz defense. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns. We're going to take a film breakdown of what Jim Schwartz wide 9 defense looks like. When we do film breakdown, we welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Lance, when you talk about the wide 9, what does it look like? What will look different to Browns fans next year when they're looking at this offense? Or defense, I'm sorry.
No worries. When you look at it, first thing you're going to see is you're going to see those defensive ends, either in a wide 5 if it's a tackle and a wide 9 if it's a defensive end. And you're going to see them really, really wide, not even covering that tight end or tackle. And what it does, 2 things. First of all, it gives you a tremendous advantage in the pass rush. because it allows you to have a great angle to the quarterback in that short corner. Secondly, in the run game, it's really productive because it's going to allow you to set the edge by alignment. So you're automatically setting the edge just by where you line up. And there's two philosophies, underlying philosophies as a defense coordinator. You're either trying to funnel everything into the middle, which Schwartz tries to do, or you're trying to spill everything to the sidelines, which is other defensive coordinators try to do. Schwartz is a guy who funnel everything back to the middle, let those linebackers, let those secondary guys that he gets down the box, let those guys make plays. But the first thing you're going to see is you're going to see those DNs really, really wide sprinter stances getting after the quarterback.
All right, we're going to take a look at it. And again, Jim Schwartz has been with the Eagles, with the Titans, with the Bills. So we're going to see some of all of those teams in these clips that we're going to look at. The first one you mentioned, kind of setting the edge, and there you see just how wide they are. Does a couple of things, creates some one-on-one matchups too, but take us through what this does in these two clips that we're going to look at here.
Well, the two things you have, first thing everybody's been talking about is setting the edge and a great angle it's going to give Myles Garrett on a pass rush. I'd like to bring up something that concerns me a little bit as well in terms of those defensive tackles. With those defensive ends being so wide, those offensive guards and tackles now have free reign at those defensive tackles. So in terms of fighting those double teams, which they really struggled with this year, this defensive scheme is actually worse for their defensive tackles until they learn how to play those double teams. However, out of the defensive end, like you said, it sets the edge. It creates a great angle. Schwartz is so good at creating matchups. So at times, he's not only going to create that edge for a wide rusher, but he's going to walk backers up in A-gap. He's going to walk backers up in B-gap. He's going to make sure those defensive ends get a one-on-one. Sometimes those defensive tackles get a one-on-one. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Myles Garrett on past situations go down to the guard a little bit more as well.
And all right, we've talked about it a little bit, so that those wide defensive ends, they can help defensive tackles. They can also hurt them. In this next clip that we're going to take a look at, talk a little bit about that. And here you see kind of they're getting one-on-ones. You got to win one-on-ones in this defensive alignment.
Well, yeah, so here's what you're going to see, a great pass rush here. And the reason you get it is because you get those wide ends and that guard is isolated. The center is going to slide left. So by sliding left, that right guard is going to be a one-on-one situation. But when you get back to the beginning of the play, if it's a run play, the thing that makes it tough is those guards are all by themselves. Those defensive tackles are all by themselves with those guards and those tackles. So in terms of a double team, they get on those double teams really, really heavy. Even more than what they did this year because they're not covering that tackle at all. The second thing it does, if they're not, if those defensive tackles are by themselves and the defensive ends are wide, it allows those offensive tackles to sometimes run right to the second level. So we always try to get our hands on, or the term I like to use is heavy, in terms of trying to get our hands on those offensive tackles so they can't get to the double team or can't get to the second level. So those are adjustments the Browns, Schwartz, and that whole defensive staff is going to have to come up with in terms of what they struggled with this year.
Lance, let me ask you this. We've talked about defensive tackles needing to take on double teams and being bigger. It would also seem that you would need that thumper linebacker in the middle with this defense because there's some of those offensive linemen that are going to be exposed that could get right to your middle linebacker potentially.
Yeah, so it's really a combination. So those defensive ends have to rush the passer well and stop the run. The defensive tackles have to do the same. They have to occupy the people they're supposed to occupy. It's different. So if you can get those guys, everybody playing their game and everybody doing their job. And I like to say, in his defense is very, very simple. It's everybody starring in their role, and it's kind of the Bill Belichick of you have a job, do your job. I used to say you have a role, star in your role, and everybody has to do their job in this defense. In a Jim Schwartz defense, everybody is equal. Everybody has an equal part. So the linebackers, having a thumper is always nice in that run game. But if everybody does their job up front, they're going to occupy some guys. And even though those offensive tackles are sometimes free runners, that means that defensive tackle has to make their play. And then when they cover that offensive tackle, that linebacker got to make a play. So they all go hand in hand. It's kind of a jigsaw puzzle with Jim Schwartz, and everybody's got to do their part. And you'll see how well coached they are and how fundamentally sound they are when the Browns get to the game field for sure.
Yeah, and Jim Schwartz alluded to that. He said we've done it with bigger guys, and we've done it with smaller linebackers. The thing was they have to be instinctual, and they have to be aggressively coming downhill, not really being passive and trying to read. Know where you're supposed to be and get there.
Yeah, and one of the things I heard him say was, this is a defense that a high school coach could break down. And it really is true. There's nothing on there that you go, oh my gosh, this is new age stuff. He finds great matchups. They're fundamentally sound. They play downhill. They're very aggressive. They're secondary. They're going to play more one high hat. They're going to allow those corners to play man. There's not a lot of bells and whistles with this defense. It's very fundamentally sound. Everybody is very aggressive. Everybody has a job to do. It's fun as a high school coach because I break it down and go, okay, that's why his defenses are good, because everybody knows what they're doing and everybody gets to play fast. And once your mind is thinking, your feet don't move. And Jim Schwartz seems to get these guys not thinking and just let them fly around and play, and they make a ton of plays. So it'll be very exciting for the Browns defense for sure.
All right, let's take a look at a couple other things that this defense is designed to do. So when you look at the defensive ends, they will oftentimes force the tackles to overset to react to them going out wide. It will also create some mismatches. Those are the two things that we're seeing in these two clips, and that's what he wants to do. Overset the tackles so your ends can take advantage of it, force mismatches so your tackles can take advantage of it.
So in the first clip here, the thing I really like is, first of all, that's a very well said. Those guys are creating, so that short edge, and Myles Garrett is so good at bending and using low pad level to get around that edge. But when you look at these clips, the linebackers often show in the gap. Second clip, no, but in the first clip, you're going to see 50 almost show in that B gap. And what he does is he's going to show 5 and 6 man pressures, and he's usually just going to bring 4. But by showing 6, he's making that offensive line account for everybody who's at the line of scrimmage. So when you see a defense walk everybody up, that offensive line, we as offensive coordinators, we have to account for everybody because we have to assume that they're blitzing. So he does a really nice job of showing those linebackers, even showing secondary guys. Those guys are all going to be down inside that box, and offensive coordinators have to account for them. What that does is it gives one-on-one matchups because it assumes you're bringing 5 or 6 on every play. For the most part, he doesn't blitz very much. He's going to bring 4, but he's going to simulate a ton of pressure, which creates those one-on-one matchups.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, and I'm listening to what you're saying, that would play into a speed guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, also like Delpit. That's a guy you could show at the line of scrimmage, and if he's not accounted for, it's going to be a problem for the offense with both of those guys, that being a safety and a linebacker.
Well, you have what you said before in terms of he's done it with all those guys. So now he can show JOK all the time because JOK can then get into his coverage and his pass drops without a problem because he's so athletic. You're also going to see Delpit. Everybody's talked about Myles Garrett, and I agree. And Ward's going to be in more man coverage. But the guy I think that can really thrive in this defense is Delpit. Because Delpit is going to be down in the box a lot. And predominantly, even on third down, he's going to be down there playing within 3 to 5 yards of that line of scrimmage. He's going to have C and D gap run responsibilities and run fits at times. He's going to be very, very good.
All right, let's take a look. We alluded to this. They play a lot of single one-high safety. It gives them some flexibility. And take us through what you see in this clip.
Well, once again, here's the thing I like about Jim Schwartz defense. It's very, very simple. So on the outside, you're going to get a deep safety. On the outside, you're going to get man coverage. You're going to see him occasionally double a slot. A safety can help over top. Delpit is going to be down in the box. So Delpit is going to be the guy who is covering a slot receiver, covering a tight end, covering a back out of the backfield, and not have that over-the-top man or zone coverage responsibilities very much. Obviously, in the NFL, there's times he's going to be on the half and he's going to have to play the half safety. But what you see in a Jim Schwartz defense is you see corners and safeties are going to be at the line of scrimmage. They're going to press coverage. They're going to fight. They're going to scramble. There's going to be lots of hands-on. You're going to see some illegal hands, holdings. You're going to see some of that stuff out of defense because they're going to be taught to be aggressive at all times. This plays into the Browns secondary with you got Ward, Emerson, Newsome. Those guys are going to be in press coverage a ton. Usually going to be one high hat. They will play some match cover 3 once in a while where they're going to pattern match some routes. But for the most part, this is going to be an aggressive, I got you secondary. And I think that plays into hands very well with these secondary guy the Browns got.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. One of the things you and I have talked about a lot is when you have Emerson, you have Ward, and you have Greg Newsome, you got three guys that are pretty good in man coverage. And Schwartz has said he wants to make life miserable for wide receivers at the line of scrimmage, and that's kind of what you were alluding to. I believe he said he wants to make life hell for him getting off the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and the thing I'd like to is that this is going to be this defense. When you see teams, and I've had people ask me, how come the Browns don't just send Ward to the best player all the time? It's because they're a zone team, and when you're a zone team, you kind of work left and right side. You kind of have your spot. Now in a Schwartz defense, this is a challenging defense. Now they're not giving up easy yards. Every yard is going to be a kind of a fight. So that idea of kind of bend don't break, that's not really a Schwartz kind of thing. He's going to challenge receivers. So what you're going to see all those guys in man coverage, but you're also going to see this pattern match cover 3, like I said, where they're going to flip Ward. So for the most part, and obviously he's probably evolved over the years as well, and he has some different things. But for the most part, Ward is going to be on the best guy all game by himself on an island in press man coverage. You're going to see that a bunch.
Before I let you go, how important is the free safety, and do you think the Browns have a guy on the roster that can be that single high safety?
Well, I think I do. I think JJ3, I think John Johnson is a guy who can do it. He's just a guy who has not been put in that position, but he's a guy who is very fundamentally sound. He plays, he understands football very well. I think this can fit him. Now, whether the Browns think that or not, we'll see. But I think he can do this. I think this is a opportunity to play over the top. This allows him to use his intelligence to know where quarterbacks want to go with the football on down and distance from the hash, from the middle of the field. But yeah, that guy in the middle of the field, he's got to be a center fielder now. He's got a ball hawk. He's got to be sideline to sideline. He's got to help guys in the slot. He's got to help in man coverage. And he's got to be a guy that kind of runs the show back there. But he's a center fielder now. In the Browns defense, he's going to be back there by himself. And I think John Johnson can do this. Watching him in practice, he's got great feet. He's got great fundamentals. And I think this is a defense that can allow him to shine, in my opinion.
Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland with the breakdown of what to expect from Jim Schwartz defense. Always good stuff. Check him out. Cleveland.com and The Plain Dealer. Always insightful breakdowns. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Randy Gurzi from Dawg Pound Daily straight ahead. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, this is Cassius. Long time since I called in. This is the quintessential Cleveland Browns fan. Here's what I want to ask you. Everybody's so focused on the change at the defensive coordinator position, which was absolutely necessary and long overdue. Why aren't we talking about the special teams coach, Mike Pieper? We need to replace him. Everybody was screaming we need to replace him, and Kevin somehow has got the heat off of him because he's changed defensive coordinator. We need a change of our special teams coach. Let me know what you think about that. Go Browns.
Yeah, I can't necessarily disagree. If we go back and take a look, just one metric, punt coverage, Browns were the worst. You see Chargers best at 3.1, league average 8.8, Browns at 12.3. Let's welcome in Randy Gurzi from Dawg Pound Daily. And Randy, I don't know that they're not going to move away from Mike Pieper, but the reason you do the offensive and defensive coordinators first is because there's a whole lot of them that are switching makeups right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with the caller as well. You kind of wonder why Prefer's, kind of flying under the radar here. I know when Stefanski was out with COVID, Prefer's the one who stepped up. So apparently they have a lot of trust in him, but it is getting hard to defend, the fact that it's not just the punt coverage like you talked about. It's constant penalties on both punt and kick coverage. And then just, a lot of, they've struggled to even field any decent returners as well. And then you throw into the issues that they had with Cade York, and you can sit here and blame Cade York all you want, but no matter what kicker they brought in under Prefer, they've had issues. So there's not a whole lot that you can point to and say that he's doing well right now. So you do kind of wonder what's going on. You're hearing reports that he's safe, but it doesn't make a lot of sense if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I can't necessarily disagree with you without question. All right, so Browns named Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator. Let's point out he is a guy that has come out and said he believes in analytics. What do you think the defense needs to be ready for under Jim Schwartz? And I know you've written an article about this on Dog Pound Daily.
I think that I wrote when they first started talking that I think he was the absolute best fit for everybody that they had out there. I know there are other names. Brian Flores was a name that's being thrown around, but Flores threw a lot more of a 3-4. And, kind of mixes into his defense, whereas you get Jim Schwartz and he works a lot with the wide 9. I know you just had Lance Reisland on here and he was talking about how they're going to have, the center field safety, which should help with a lot of that deep coverage. But I'm really excited to see what he'll do with the wide 9, where it's kind of putting the defensive ends at almost in a linebacker, stand-up linebacker kind of role. They still got the hand in the dirt, but they got that kind of a little bit more space when they get out a little bit wider. It's going to give somebody like Myles Garrett more room to operate, make it harder on the offensive linemen. So I really like the way that he attacks with the front 4. He also was he talked about in his opening press conference, the linebackers. He doesn't believe that you have to have the big, heavy hitting linebackers. He likes some people that are just explosive and instinctive. And we have that with JOK. If Jacob Phillips can stay healthy, Tony Fields has shown flashes, but he talked about, he's totally fine with 220-pound linebackers as long as they're instinctive and can go make plays. So I think those things are great, but I think the best thing about Jim Schwartz is if you look at every team he's been with, Tennessee with Albert Haynesworth, Philadelphia with Fletcher Cox, he always has that big defensive tackle. So I think he's going to kind of be an Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski's year to try to shore that up there and get somebody in the middle of the defense that can make an impact.
Yeah, he always seems to also have the answers when something isn't quite right with one of his defenses. And we couldn't necessarily say that last year without question. All right, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Great show as usual. But I was just wondering when Stefanski and Berry met with Schwartz, if he told him, hey, I need this, a defensive tackle, and I need me a center fielder, and he can work with the rest. Well, hopefully that would be DeForest Buckner and Jesse Bates. Boy, that would be nice. But anyways, great show. Love you, brother, and you be safe now. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. I would imagine that Schwartz has said, we could use this. I don't think he's going to, just in listening to his tone, he's not going to really make any demands, but I think he will say, hey, we could use this.
Yeah, and Andrew Berry, I think, does a really good job of trying to build the roster around what the coaches want. We saw that with Joe Woods, who really wanted those faster defensive tackles. He said when he got to Cleveland that he was going to stop the run by going after the quarterback. And you saw that's how they kind of built their defense. They got those guys that were quick, fast, and could penetrate and get after the quarterback. It ended up hurting them in the run game, but I think that their coaching staff is really good about listening to one another. And then I think Andrew Berry does good going after that. I like the names that he mentioned, DeForest Buckner and Jesse Bates. One thing you got to remember is there's not a whole lot of cap room. Both of those guys would probably be out of their price range. I can't see them being able to afford Jesse Bates as long as John Johnson's on the roster. DeForest Buckner, you're already paying 25 million, somewhere in that range to Myles Garrett. I don't think you're going to be forking out a huge contract for someone like a DeForest Buckner or even a Daron Payne. I think if anything, they might get a stopgap guy and then be able to look in the draft. I wouldn't get hopes up on a DeForest Buckner or somebody like that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they will create some cap space by extending out and converting, but It'll be interesting to see. Those will, when you start hearing about contracts being redone, that's when your ears will perk up. So it keeps things interesting in the offseason. Along those lines, 3 players that could follow Jim Schwartz to Cleveland. This again from Dawg Pound Daily. Number 3 is one of those safeties, Andrew Adams. Number 2, another linebacker, undersized but really effective in the defense for the Titans, David Long Jr. And number 1, Javon Hargrave, defensive tackle. That our last comment about can you afford him, that would have fit. I think that fits Javon Hargrave.
It does, and that article was actually written by Greg Newland, and he said something in there to that effect that Javon Hargrave might be a little on the price, the higher end with as far as price goes. You're absolutely right with what you said. Teams will, they'll move that money around. They'll switch up some of the guaranteed. Deshaun Watson's contract this year is kind of built that way that they can give him more of it up front and then spread it out throughout the remainder of the contract. So. You can't never say never. You can't say that they're not going to go out and make a big move. But yeah, Javon Hargrave would be fantastic, but I think you're right. He would cost a lot of money. Andrew Adams is one that I really like. I think he's a guy that he's not a big name, so he's not going to be an incredibly expensive player, but he's somebody that can help on special teams. He can be a starter when necessary. He can kind of be that third safety. If they're not going to bring back Ronnie Harrison, and I can see reasons not to, I think Andrew Adams would be a perfect replacement.
So I don't have names for you, but here's a profile of what I would look at. Look at a guy that is coming off somewhat of a disappointing year, who has a big contract number that a team may want to get out from under, because those kind of defensive linemen are going to want to play on a one-year deal for Jim Schwartz, because they know he's going to put them in position to succeed and get a big contract after a year of production here.
Yeah, and you saw something similar with Deion Jones when the Browns brought him over. He was able to get the final year of his contract nullified. So the second half of the season really was the only part of the season he played. He was able to get out there, show what he can do. He started out a little bit slow, but as the season went on, he was making a few plays. So you get that guy. I think that your strategy there is perfect. You get that guy who knows he's coming up on a big contract or wants to get a big contract and has the motivation to go out and do that. And you can use that to your advantage.
Randy Gurzi and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Also hear from Kevin Stefanski, Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Randy Gurzi from Dawg Pound Daily. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, Dave, this is Mike down in West Virginia. Love the show. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about possibly bringing in a DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Cooks, et cetera, et cetera. This Michael Woods that we drafted last year, to me, when we drafted him, every time he had an opportunity, he flashed big time. I mean, extremely quick out of his breaks. He looked very explosive. And you've got Amari Cooper that's clearly a number one. You've got DPJ that shows you that even if he's double covered, you hit him in the hands 9 times out of 10, he's going to catch it. And Michael Woods looks like he can be a burner or even run out of the slot. Yeah, it would be a sexy move to try to get a Brandon Cooks or DeAndre Hopkins, but it's going to cost a lot of money. As explosive as this Michael Woods kid is, why not develop him and stay with your top two and filter this guy in and then try to add a little bit of depth? You guys take care. Have a great weekend.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Randy, we're setting you up here. You wrote an article about players to watch in 2023. Take us through what you like about Michael Woods and what you said in that article.
Well, he was kind of a player that when he was drafted, I didn't know a whole lot about him. He wasn't somebody that I saw a lot at Oklahoma. He played at Arkansas for 3 years before that. But when he got to training camp with the Browns, it seemed like if the ball got anywhere near him, he was catching it. He ran really crisp routes. He's not exactly a burner, but as that caller pointed out, he does get deep. It's more like he takes the really long strides, and he just gets downfield. I think he's just a very good route runner, and he has taken advantage of every opportunity he's given. Unfortunately, injuries really slowed him down during his rookie season. But I believe it was the second or third day of training camp that he was really just looked like the best receiver out there. When he was fully healthy and out there working with Deshaun Watson, with Jacoby Brissett, and like I said, he caught absolutely everything. So I also agree with what he's saying. It's kind of, that may be the flashy pick to go out and get a DeAndre Hopkins, to get a Brandon Cooks, but I don't think you have to do that. I think you saw that the offense was very good. You do need a third guy to step up. I don't have any problem with going out and trying to find a veteran to push David Bell or Michael Woods, but I definitely think that you can get something out of some of these younger guys on this roster. All right.
Before I let you go, Kevin Stefanski, again, this was this morning on ESPN, Cleveland's The Really Big Show, talking about his style of coaching and why it's important for him to be who he is.
I can only be what I am, and to the players, to the coaches. You can be even keel, you can be fire, you can grab them by the face mask. You can still hold people accountable, regardless of your style, if that makes sense. My approach with our players is I'm very, very transparent. I tell the truth. When sometimes you don't like to hear it. Players, I get that there's certain messages that players don't like to hear. I don't know what my role is something you might hear from a guy, and that really means I don't like my role.
Right.
So I just tell them how it is. And I understand where it's the question. I think for me, it's trying to just be fair at every single junction point with this team. Be fair when you have a player issue. Be fair when you have something coming up at each spot. And I think we've done that. When you lose, when you win 7 games, it gets magnified.
And that's absolutely true. Winning cures everything. Losing creates all kinds of issues.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I loved everything that he said. I don't know where people got this idea that he doesn't hold players accountable. I mean, when you had the issue with OBJ, they tried to sit down, talk it out. OBJ was released. They had an issue with David Njoku. They sat down, they talked it out. Next thing you know, David Njoku's happy and producing, ends up getting a massive contract. He disciplined Perrion Winfrey. He disciplined Myles Garrett. I think Kevin Stefanski, he does a really good job with that. He doesn't get enough credit. I had one guy telling me that he wished the reason he doesn't like Stefanski is because he doesn't show enough emotion. He doesn't get angry on the sideline. But I've always said you have to be who you have to be genuine. You have to be sincere, be yourself. Wade Phillips, back during his day, people would always talk about how he was way too nice. Well, that's just who he is, And I think if you tried to be fake, you tried to, fit yourself into a certain box, people are going to see that you're bogus, so they're not going to follow you. So I think he's right. You got to be yourself. And that's who he is. I think he's transparent. He's honest. I think for the most part, the players do respect him. And I think we keep seeing that. And he said it right there. The problem's magnified when you're losing, but because back when they were winning, he was fantastic. So I think they start winning this year, things will be different.
I agree wholeheartedly. And the people that want a yeller and a screamer, let me ask them this. Would you like your boss sitting there screaming at you every time you messed up? These guys know when they know when they blow a coverage. They know when they didn't do something. So he's consistent, and I think that's the important thing with professional athletes. Randy Gurzi, as always, man, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Randy.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Randy Gurzi, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff with Dog Pound Daily. All right, before we go, each week in conjunction with the Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program, we recognize a role model student from somewhere in the state of Ohio. Today we head to Gilmore Academy to meet Will Lazaro, senior, who is a star on the Lancers football team as a tight end, defensive end, also as a star on the Lancers baseball team, and above all, a 3.8 student in the classroom with really tough classes at Gilmore Academy. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is proud to salute Gilmore's Will Lazaro, this week's Shining Star. At 6'5", 240 pounds, Will Lazaro just looks like an athlete. And in this case, looks are not deceiving. Lazaro, a senior at Gilmore Academy, is a two-way star as a tight end and a defensive lineman on the football team. He's also a star pitcher on the baseball team.
Ever since I can remember, I wanted to play college baseball. Baseball was my thing. I wanted to be a pitcher. And the summer going into my sophomore year, I ended up having a stress fracture in my back from baseball. Just being so tall and all the rotation just ended up injuring my back. So I had to sit out all of my junior year, pretty much football. Was able to play a little baseball junior year, but nothing sufficient. And then going into my senior year, we hired a new football coach, and he said, "Will, I know you love baseball, but football can really open doors for you."
The advice was very good for Lazaro. He attended a football camp for Harvard, Yale, and several of the Ivy League schools, where he caught the eyes of recruiters from Middlebury College, an East Coast Division III school recognized as one of the best academic schools in the country.
It's a smaller school, which I liked. It's roughly 3,000 or 4,000, nothing huge. Their pre-med program is huge. Academics really come first there. It's 10 football games, so it's not overpowering. So you just play in your conference, and then the winner is decided after that. And it's just really, it's the best of both worlds is what it really is.
You never see him showing up an opponent. You never see him showing up a teammate. He's Gilmore through and through. We're going to miss him next year, but we're going to be better because he was here for these 4 years, no question about that.
Lazaro carries above a 3.8 GPA at Gilmore with challenging courses. The pre-med program is important for Will. He has his eyes on becoming a pediatrician.
I fell in love with science and medicine here thanks to Dr. Goel's biology class last year. And I've always been good with kids. I've always had fun. I have a ton of cousins and a lot of little cousins, so that's ultimately what I want to do. It just made the most sense.
To get no better than Will Lazaro. I tell everybody, he's the poster boy for Gilmore Academy. He is so well balanced. He is, I tease him all the time. It's like, I got 2 daughters at home. If you want to marry one of them, you can have them right now. Well, that's how good a kid he is.
It will be a challenge for Lazaro to balance college football with a pre-med course load at an institution like Middlebury. It's something he's aware of and ready for.
It is going to be very difficult, but I'm prepared. People have told me that my maturity level is there, which is very nice of them to say. And I think Gilmore's really helped prepare me for that with the freedom that we give our students. I mean, we have free time in the middle of the day and to be able to balance work, because we do get a lot of work here. And the freedom allows us to really prepare for the next level.
It shouldn't be a surprise that Will is also involved in the community and volunteers at Gilmore. He helps run the CYO program at Gilmore Academy, which is an important part of helping enrollment at the school. This year, Lazaro is a supervisor.
I do scheduling every week, and then when it comes to the actual days, we arrive at 12 on Sunday, and I'll start filling out sheets. I'll check score sheets. I'll get ice packs for kids if they get hurt. I'll run around and make sure everyone is doing their job and doing okay. And then I'll pick up lunch for everyone, and then I'll be here around 8:30, 9 cleaning up at the end of the day.
He does all the assigning of the kids. He's like my site manager, and as a 17, 18-year-old young man, he's in control. I kind of like have been grooming him. He's done such a phenomenal job. He's responsible. He's polite. He's eloquent. He's been raised extremely well by his mother and father, and we can't say enough. He's a 2-sport athlete. Another one, head of the Spirit Club. So he makes sure that all sports are represented and all sports are celebrated. We cannot have enough Will Lazaros in our school.
If you know a student who deserves recognition, we want to hear about them, and you can nominate them completely online. Go to OhioLottery.com. Find the About section. Click on Partners in Education. There you will see links to nomination forms. Nominate that student as an academic all-star, and they could end up being featured as our next shining star. Well done, Gilmore's Will Lazaro. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here Monday at 4. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you Monday at 4 on Sports for CLE.